Today is the winter season, Tuesday, the 23rd of December, 2025. As the year draws to a close, it is traditionally a crucial moment for us to pause, reflect on the past year's gains and losses, and look forward to the future direction. In the final months of this year, a significant sign of depression in the Chinese economy has emerged. This economic chill has begun to break through private boundaries and spread rapidly within the circles of state-owned enterprises. The way depression spreads follows a distinct pattern. It usually starts in industries with high market volatility, heavy assets, and high debt, much like a row of falling dominoes reaching for the core of the economy. After 2022 in China, the real estate industry was naturally the first to falter. Developers fell one after another, leaving behind nothing but skeletal unfinished buildings and massive, bottomless black holes of corporate debt. This crisis then traveled upstream along the supply chain, causing companies to collapse in succession. Initially, it was the unprotected private enterprises that fell, as they were the first to feel the biting cold of the market. Soon, the impact reached state-owned enterprises. Large numbers of SOEs began to face debt defaults, inability to pay salaries, and frequent labor disputes. The legendary iron rice bowl was no longer a guarantee of security. The year 2025 can be described as the sunset of China's construction industry. A research report on distressed assets recently went viral, revealing shocking data that confirms the industry's deep winter has finally arrived. The report states that in 2025, the number of practitioners in China's construction industry dropped by 23%. Meanwhile, the shortage of skilled technical workers has surprisingly reached a staggering 5 million people. Let me repeat this critical data. In 2025, construction employment fell by 23%, while the skilled worker gap hit 5 million. Everyone should take a moment to truly reflect on the weight of these terrifying numbers. It's quite telling. What does a 23% drop in practitioners actually mean? In plain language, you can simply understand it as a 23% layoff rate, or a 23% unemployment rate across the entire sector. Within this data, there are certainly some people who left because their current salary was unsatisfactory. Since they possess specific professional skills, they chose to transition into other industries for better opportunities. However, under the current economic climate, the vast majority were forced to leave. They lost their jobs due to company bankruptcies or massive layoffs. This is the cruel reality hidden behind the cold statistics. In China, there are no precise public unemployment statistics for specific sectors, so we must rely on these approximations. Therefore, a 23% drop in practitioners is essentially a proxy for the actual layoff rate. Let's look at a more specific number for comparison. According to the China Construction Industry Association, in the first half of 2022, there were 41.74 million people employed in this massive industry. Cutting 23% means that approximately 10 million people in this industry have lost their jobs. Think about the 10 million families behind this number. It is a social earthquake of immense proportions. Another piece of information is the 5 million person gap in skilled labor. Doesn't this sound contradictory? On one hand, the industry is laying off millions, suggesting an extreme surplus of labor. Yet, on the other hand, there is a severe shortage of talent. This phenomenon explains the deep structural issues in construction. It is a total mismatch between the available labor and the industry's actual needs. The current picture shows that small subcontractors are disappearing rapidly. Consequently, simple and replaceable manual labor opportunities are being squeezed out of the market, leading to mass grassroots. On the flip side, large contractors and state-owned construction companies are heavily in debt. Collecting payments has become extremely difficult, leaving their capital chains stretched to the absolute breaking point. These large firms need technical talent reserves, but they simply have no cash. they dare not employ or retain people, leading to a massive drain of experienced technical workers from the system. Theoretically, projects under construction need finishing, and completed buildings require constant maintenance. Skilled workers are essential for this, but the reality is they cannot afford to stay without pay. This leads to a terrifying consequence. The quality of China's construction is regressing. It is not just about unemployment. It is an irreversible decline in the standards of the built environment. With skilled workers gone, where will quality come from? Projects that are currently under construction may remain unfinished for a long time, becoming permanent scars on the urban landscape of China. Even if they are finished, they are often shoddily built and full of hidden dangers. The victims of these rotten-tail buildings will suffer, as they might eventually move into hazardous homes. Another fatal hidden danger involves the maintenance of old buildings. Many remember the Hongfu Court fire in Hong Kong last November, a tragedy caused by the poor upkeep of an aging structure. Hongfu Court was completed in 1983. Generally, after 20 years of use, a building reaches a turning point in its lifespan. From that point on, it enters a period of intensive and frequent maintenance. Typical North American houses, often called detached villas in China, are different from high-rise buildings. Their frames are usually wooden, making them much easier and more flexible to maintain over time. Except for foundations and basements made of concrete, they rarely use steel or cement. Wooden frames are covered with brick or siding, making the structure relatively simple, breathable, and easy to repair. As long as these houses are properly maintained, replacing parts and fixing leaks, they can easily last over 100 years. They are durable enough to be passed down through many generations. However, modern high-rise buildings face unique mechanical and structural challenges. They are not the same concept as small villas and, by their very nature, cannot last nearly as long. If the building materials are high quality, and the construction strictly follows the design, these towers can usually stand for 50 years without major issues. That is the ideal scenario for urban life. After 20 years, various components begin to fail. Problems emerge with facade peeling, waterproofing failures, pipe aging, and electrical system malfunctions, requiring constant and expensive professional intervention. After years of use, maintenance shifts from small fixes, like replacing valves, to the total replacement of major systems. This is extremely costly and requires a high level of technical expertise. If there were issues with material quality or cutting corners during the original construction phase, the consequences are disastrous. Substandard work during the boom years is a ticking time bomb. In such cases, the building may develop severe wall cracks and leaks much earlier than expected. It could even become a dangerous uninhabitable structure in less than 20 years of use. Most of the buildings from China's real estate explosion in the early 2000s are now reaching 2026. They are about to enter a period of intensive, unavoidable, and very expensive maintenance. But now, with the construction industry in deep winter and 5 million skilled workers gone, who will do the work? This isn't just an economic issue. It is a threat to public safety. This is no longer just a question of unemployment. It is a matter of life and death. It concerns the fundamental safety of every resident living in these high-rise urban forests. The report also mentioned that the profit margins of leading construction companies this year have fallen to a measly 2%. This margin is as thin as a razor blade. New construction starts have dropped by 10% year-on-year. This aligns perfectly with October data, showing that real estate investment in China has also fallen by 10% compared to last year. In the construction industry, administrative power plays a leading role due to the importance of qualification approvals. The government essentially decides who gets the licenses and who stays in business. Therefore, the leading companies in this sector are almost exclusively state-owned enterprises. These massive construction firms are typically direct subsidiaries of provincial or municipal governments. In September, a user on Jihu listed the names of well-known construction companies that have collapsed. A total of 17 major firms were on the list. A truly shocking revelation. The vast majority are state-owned or have state-owned capital backgrounds. This data only goes up to September, and the list of fallen giants continues to grow longer every week. It is said that the number of small and medium-sized construction firms, especially those with private backgrounds, that have perished is countless. The industry is effectively a graveyard of failed businesses. At the top of the list are state-owned enterprises with long histories. For example, Hefei Construction Group has a 67-year history, dating all the way back to its founding in 1958. They were dragged down by Evergrande during their peak years. 70% of Hefei Construction Group's projects were tied to Evergrande. This deep binding proved to be a fatal strategic mistake. When Evergrande failed to pay its massive bills, Hefei Construction became insolvent. This has become the standard template for the collapse of many companies in the construction sector. On one side, they are weighed down by the massive unpaid debts of developers. On the other, they are crushed by their own excessive financial leverage and debt obligations. Below them, a crowd of small subcontractors are screaming for their own payments, pulled from all sides. These companies are effectively being torn apart by the weight of the crisis. Hefei Construction Group entered bankruptcy reorganization in 2025. Its total assets were 12.73 billion yuan, a figure that sounds massive but is hollow on the inside. Its total liabilities reached 16.23 billion yuan, leaving a deficit of 3.5 billion. This gap is too large for a simple debt restructuring, leaving bankruptcy reorganization as the only option. However, bankruptcy reorganization is different from total liquidation. In reorganization, the legal status of the company is maintained, along with its core business functions, in hopes of a rescue. The goal is to save the enterprise, but for a famous state-owned enterprise like Hefei Construction to reach this point, it is effectively brain dead in the eyes of the market. They simply haven't pulled the plug yet. Liquidating a company entirely is a massive blow to the local government's credit and image. So they try to avoid it. To maintain social stability and save face, the local government tries to leave some room for maneuver, even if the company remains as nothing more than an empty shell. Jiangsu Construction Group also appeared on the list. It holds the prestigious special grades qualification for construction contracting, making it a true industry giant, with undeniable former strength. This firm also has a glorious history of participating in the construction of Olympic venues. At its peak, it employed nearly 9,000 people, including a massive pool of technical talent. It was once an industry benchmark for talent. But if you check the current corporate records, you would be shocked to see how many employees they have left today. The number of insured employees is now only 91. That is just 1% of its peak. Take a moment to feel the true meaning of economic winter. From 9,000 to 91. Jiangsu Construction was also dragged into a liquidity black hole. In the projects it undertook, the proportion of its own advance payments reached 30% of the total project value. This means that they were essentially paying out of their own pockets just to start the work. It shows that the industry ecology was already extremely unhealthy long before the crash. The contradiction between the scarcity of new projects and the massive overcapacity of companies has become severe. In truth, construction firms have been cannibalizing each other for years. So, where did companies like Jiangsu Construction get their liquidity? They borrowed, of course, huge unpaid bills from developers, combined with high leverage created a death trap. This became the standard industry setup. These two factors acted like a double-stranded noose, slowly tightening around the necks of these construction companies until they could no longer breathe. The direct cause of Jiangsu Construction's downfall was Evergrande alone, which owed them over 10 billion yuan. Truly, Evergrande has been a catastrophic plague on the entire industry. Several provincial-level construction firms were ruined by them. Ultimately, Jiangsu Construction could not repay its debts and entered bankruptcy reorganization in 2024, ending an era of growth. Then there is Xi'an Construction Group, the first enterprise in the Northwest, with dual special grade qualifications for housing and municipal works. They built the Xi'an metro system. Even this model of excellence has now fallen. They announced a debt default in 2025. While they haven't reached the final stage of bankruptcy yet, the situation is dire. Reports suggest that the layoff rate in some of their branch offices has exceeded 80%. They are standing on the very edge of the abyss, with the end in sight. Xi'an Construction fell because it was primarily tied to the Greenland Group. The unpaid engineering fees from Greenland dragged them down, following the exact same tragic pattern. The explosion pattern is identical to the others, so I want to repeat it. Next is Shanghai Construction Group, which went viral in October 2025 for a new invention. One of its subsidiaries created the concept of Xi Gang, resting from post. Xi means rest, and gang means post. It sounds elegant, but the reality is incredibly cruel. According to company documents, the labor relationship remains, but because the company cannot provide work, the employee is sent home to rest indefinitely, without being officially fired. This means the employee waits at home. Why not just fire them? Because during this rest period, the company only has to pay a tiny fraction of the base salary. If there are no new projects or payments after a year, the company can then fire the employee. By then, the base for calculating severance pay has dropped significantly. Even if the company pays the required N1 compensation later, it will be a pittance. It is a cold, calculated move to save every possible cent at the employee's expense. This news was a big deal because Shanghai Construction is a powerful, old-school listed company and a state-owned enterprise under the Shanghai municipal government. It was listed in 1998 and achieved a backdoor overall listing in 2010. This was rare, as the entire company went public, rather than just its best assets. This proved its immense strength and background. But now, even a giant like Shanghai Construction is not far from the death list, showing the depth of the crisis. While they haven't officially defaulted on debt yet, their unique approach to layoffs caught everyone's attention, reflecting a desperate kind of corporate creativity in survival. Shanghai Construction is like a patient, not yet in the hospice. With the Shanghai government behind it, they might last a bit longer than their provincial peers. The list also includes Guangxi Tianjin and Nantong construction groups, among many others. I won't list them all. The list is simply too long and depressing to finish. Usually, there are only 1 or 2 provincial-level construction firms per province. In total, there are fewer than 100 such high-level companies in all of China. Yet, more than a dozen are already dead or in a terminal state. If you think about it, a catastrophe of industry-wide proportions has already taken place. Across the industry, the death rate for state-owned enterprises is far lower than for private ones. If so many souls are falling, private firms must be suffering infinitely more. Looking further up the chain, above provincial firms are the massive central state-owned enterprises. Central SOS, like China State Construction and China Railway Construction. These central SOAs will eventually be affected as well. However, they are more likely to be thinned out, rather than killed off given their deep reserves and support. Their projects are different. Provincial firms focus on domestic commercial housing and municipal works, which are highly sensitive to market fluctuations and developer health. In contrast, Central SOS handle large-scale infrastructure, like railways, major highways, and dams, often linked to the Belt and Road Initiative and national strategy. Their debts are directly backed by the central government, giving them a much higher safety margin. They are the last line of defense for the construction sector. However, as fixed asset investment continues to cool down, even these giants will face harder times. Their iron rice bowl is simply made of thicker iron than the others. Simply put, the fall of these provincial firms will make local government finances even more difficult, creating a vicious cycle that is hard to break. The base salaries and social security of these failed SO employees will become an extra burden on local budgets, further accelerating the deterioration of local finances. These are the problems we must foresee as we look toward the economy in the coming year. Besides construction, another critical area to watch is the financial sector. A phenomenon to note is that the number of small and medium-sized banks, such as urban and rural commercial banks, is decreasing at an accelerating pace. In the first half of 2025, this number dropped significantly. It is estimated that 400 to 500 small banks disappeared over the year, swallowed up by larger entities. Where did they go? They were merged into larger banks to increase their scale and dilute the risk of their massive piles of non-performing loans. Comparing this to history, the current state of China's banking sector is roughly equivalent to the situation in the US during the Great Depression between 1930 and 1931. These enterprises and banks, already dead or on the way out, are the canaries in the coal mine we must watch as we face the deepening winter of 2026.